What is going on, Brad Gang? We see the squad already in the dang chat. Dropping SDS if you are vibing with me on this beautiful Friday as we get ready for playoff football. Let me say that one more time. Playoff football is amongst us here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very, very excited as I am sure you are as well. I love seeing everyone in the chat. Let's go. What's up, guys? So, what we're going to be doing today on this particular episode is we are going to preview 49ers versus Cowboys. Not only that, Jordan Elliott from Niners Nation is going to be joining us here shortly to help preview the Cowboys versus the 49ers. Also get a couple of his thoughts on Rams beat down in overtime. Absolutely looking forward to it. Also, quickly, before we get into some of the updates heading into the game against the Cowboys, I have to shout out the Sourdough Squad. It was fun to see the Sourdough Squad take over the 49ers YouTube chat there for a second. That was pretty cool. We saw all the gang out there in full force to enjoy that press conference that we had earlier today. Let's actually transition and jump right into some of the things that we learned from that press conference. Obviously, a good majority of you guys were in there with me. So you're already kind of up to speed, but let's take a look anyways. Let's take a look anyways at some of the injury updates. And we will get that pulled up here on the screen. Here we go. So before Jordan hops on to kind of go over and preview some of that stuff, we're just going to go over some of the injury reports that came out. Everything is pointing towards the potential of Azeez Al-Shaair being available this week. Mitch Wishnowsky could also be available this week. But the biggest news, Trent Williams is a go. Trent Williams will play, and it's going to be beautiful. So really, really looking forward to getting my personal GOAT back in Trent. So Trent Williams will be back. Jimmy Garoppolo should be good to go. No setbacks with the thumb. So that is phenomenal news. Phenomenal news. Like the 49ers are getting healthy at a wonderful time. Honestly, couldn't be a better time for a injury riddled franchise. We've come to almost be used to being injured at this point. Like it's a foregone conclusion. 49ers and injuries. They're one and the same, right? But in this particular instance, the 49ers are probably, all things considered, obviously no Raheem Mostert, no Jason Verrett, no Kinlaw, no guys, none of those starters are coming through the door. But we've been able to have a lot of backups step up. Even guys like Mo Hurst, who has been hurt for a big portion of the year. He's available. Like it's K'Wan Williams. K'Wan Williams decided that it wasn't a good situation for him to play last week. This week, K'Wan Williams said he's good to go. So that is absolutely fantastic for all of that. We like that very much so. Here's the official practice report from the week. As you can see, Al-Shaair questionable. Marcel Harris was questionable. Talanoa Hufanga questionable. Mitch Wishnowsky questionable. The only weird thing from this report that we could really pull off of it is the fact that Al-Shaair was not a participant on Friday. So, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be necessarily an issue. So that's good to know. So that's good, but something to monitor. We'll be watching that. So, Marcel Harris, though, could be available. Talanoa Hufanga, both of them were limited participants in the week, which means they are trending towards being available. And then we got the full participant from Mitch Wish today as well. Mitch Wish will be a go. So that is some good news, ladies and gentlemen. That is some good news for the San Francisco 49ers right now. Chris Royal wants to know, he wants to poll the chat. How many sacks do you think we get? Over under 4. I want to see what the chat has to say from this. I'm going to go ahead and hit the over. I'm going to go ahead and hit the over. I'll tell you why I'm going to smash the over, in fact. I'm smashing the over because of kind of like the way in which Nick Bosa spoke about these offensive linemen that he's going to be facing. He gave them their respects. He said they're a good team, they're a good unit, all that good stuff. However, he's seen on tape, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a bit shocked to hear him say it out loud, but he said it. He said, I see all those guys on tape. I've seen them lose, which means what he's telling you is he's like, there is a recipe to beat these offensive linemen, and he's got it. He's seen it. We look at that when we watch tape. That's what we look for. We're looking for tendencies. We're looking for tells. We're looking what a certain guy struggles with. Does he struggle with power? Does he struggle more with speed? Does he struggle with hands? What is it? Nick Bosa is like, oh, they're good, but we've seen them get beat. And it was just like a really just matter of fact, confident answer from Nick Bosa. And I'm like, okay, yeah. He clearly saw something on tape, just like we indicate all the time. He saw something on tape that he felt is going to be a really good situation for the San Francisco 49ers. So that being the case, I'm smashing the over. The other reason why I'm smashing the over on 4 sacks for the entire defensive line unit is because Nick Bosa got snubbed. I mean, I get it. It probably sucks for Nick that he wasn't able to get on. But I guarantee you that there is going to be some animosity there. Nick Bosa got snubbed. He's going to be hungry. Don't poke the bear. Do not poke the bear. And we're going to bring in Jordan Elliott of NinersNation.com, one of their top writers and reporters. He's going to join us to talk about this wonderful matchup that we have previewing against the Cowboys. My boy, Jordan, how are we doing on this beautiful Friday?
I will be honest. I have been thrown off and confused since about 9:30, 10 o'clock this morning. I have been spending the last, 6.5 hours, going over any possible scenario to which somebody could have watched the majority of the players who played in the NFL this year, particularly at the left tackle position, and not come away thinking that Trent Williams was the best player at that position. I heard you were talking about Bosa when I was waiting to come on. I know a lot of people are upset about that. I am more not upset, but more confused by Trent Williams not being unanimous first team All-Pro than I am about Bosa not being named to either of the All-Pro teams. The reason why I say that is, as good as Bosa is, there's a lot of guys at the edge position that you could argue deserve a spot there. I think it's a little bit more of an argument. Trent Williams just had arguably the greatest season of all time for a tackle, ever. We're talking literally in the history of the sport. You could argue it was the best we've ever seen somebody play. And somebody, nothing to take away from Rashawn Slater. Anybody who was watching the draft stuff Brad and I did last year, we loved Rashawn Slater. He's a great player. He's going to be really good. Wasn't as good as Trent Williams. Somebody voted for Orlando Brown Jr. Again, great player, no problems with Orlando Brown. He gave up 21 more pressures than Trent Williams did. Like, it's not even, it's just, I can't wrap my head around it. And again, it comes back to Trent Williams is one of the most talented football players I've ever seen. And it's absolutely absurd that it took him until he was 33 years old to get this first team All-Pro nod. And then it felt like people just voted to be just like different and be contrarian and like, oh, I have to go against the grain. I can't just vote for the guy who is definitely the best player in the entire sport. Like, I'm sorry, I don't want to come in here ranting, but it's pissed me off.
No, I freaking love it. You came in the most spitting that hot fire.
It's
Keep
been
going.
bugging me literally for hours. I normally don't let stuff like that get to me, but it just makes no sense, man. It's I'm livid. I'm livid for you.
I love it.
Yeah, man.
It's not often that you hear people talking with that much like fire in their belly about the offensive line. So I absolutely love it, respect it, and you're 100% on point. The fact that Trent Williams, again, you said it. I mean, he's probably the best player in the entire NFL at this point, let alone the best offensive lineman, wasn't a unanimous vote, and the fact that it was his first time making an all-pro list, it's unbelievable. It's erroneous. Okay, so
I will say this, Tyron Smith, who was on the Cowboys, who's playing this week, he did get a vote. He was really good this year. I respect Tyron Smith getting a vote here. I think that you could maybe, like, I understand it. Again, I would not do it myself. I think I thought it was pretty clear that it was Trent Williams. But the Orlando Brown and the Rashawn Slater gets me. So I tweeted this earlier. Trent Williams had 16 pressures. Rashawn Slater had 26, which, again, for a rookie left tackle, like, that's really good. He had a good season. Nowhere near as good as Trent Williams. Orlando Brown had 37. And then I like using the eye test. I'm not a huge fan of PFF grades, but for people who don't get to watch all the snaps in the film we do, they might like it. If you take PFF's run blocking grade, Trent Williams was at 98.5. And this is a scale of 0 to 100. So he's at 98.5, which is literally the highest grade they've ever given in the history of their company. Slater had a very respectable 80.4. Orlando Brown had a 66.8. So he's not great run blocking, and he gave up 37 pressures to Trent Williams 16. And somebody was just like, oh, you know what? I just think Orlando Brown was better than Trent Williams this year. I'm totally fine with people not agreeing and having differing opinions, but I think there should be some level of like citing your work here and why you think a certain player should be here. And we can get into it too if it's okay with you later about like the whole Bosa thing and the edge players, because what it feels like people do, and I understand, like, I try to watch as much film as I can. There's no way in hell I have time throughout the week to watch every single player play every single snap. I watch what I can, but I also don't try to form my opinions based on a box score. And it feels like a lot of the all-pro voting is simply based on box scores and like stats that are like archaic or shouldn't really matter. And the unfortunate thing for offensive linemen is there isn't really a stat we can point to that's like, oh my God, Trent Williams just took 3 guys out going to the second level and got, like these things that he does that are incredible. Like, you can't quantify it unless you're watching it with your own eyes. So I don't know. I'm really upset that it felt like for the first time in a long time, a 49ers player was getting that like recognition as like the guy. Like, we had a guy who's in the conversation for the best player in football. And somebody was like, no, I'm going to vote for a guy who every metric says is not only like not as good, but doesn't even belong in the same discussion. It's just ridiculous, man. I'm upset. I
love it. It's fantastic. Jordan came in spicy today. We love spicy Jordan, especially when he's talking about our GOAT, Trent Williams. I absolutely love it. We'll get into all of it. But first, Jordan, let's touch on a little bit because, of course, the game against the Rams is going to have an implication on, some of the matchups that we see against the Cowboys. But I just wanted to get your overall sense watching that game last weekend of the San Francisco 49ers coming back to tie it, get into overtime, get the dub. Man, how good did that feel?
It felt great. And for anybody who watched last week, you and I talked about, like the quarterback who would start. And I said very explicitly that it may not make sense to some people, but if they get into a hole, the best person to dig them out of that hole is Jimmy Garoppolo, even if he contributes to putting them in that hole, because that's just the way it's gone this season.
That's just the way it is.
Happened, he puts them in a 17-0, not single-handedly, but he contributes heavily to putting them in a 17-0 hole. And then he just has a drive for the ages that no matter what happens this season, I will always look back on fondly, because to go 88 yards with no timeouts in like a minute, I think it was a minute and 1 second was the official time on that drive. It was incredible, man. And then to play with that like confidence and that, kind of swagger in the second half, it's part of what makes watching the guy so infuriating, because I joked that like if he played like it was 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter and you need a touchdown to tie or win the game for the entire 60 minutes, the Niners never would have needed to trade up for Trey Lance. They would be set with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, because in that specific time frame, Jimmy Garoppolo is just an incredible football player. But at the same time, they were in that hole for a reason. My whole take on this is I don't really care what led up to it. They won the game, whether they won 27-24 or 124-24. I really don't care. They needed to win the game to get in the playoffs, and they did. So, yes, I understand people saying, oh, well, his heroics don't matter because he did this, this, and this. Guess what? I'm not going to look at it that way. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. And I think that, again, it just comes back to what we talked about last week. As much as we're excited about Trey Lance, as much as I want to see him play, right now for this team, Jimmy Garoppolo is a guy that, yes, he's volatile. Yes, you don't know what you're going to get, but he's just risen to the occasion so many times in these big moments that you gotta let him play. You gotta let him ride it out and just see where the season goes. And you reevaluate. I don't think he'll be back next year, barring some miraculous Super Bowl run where he goes on like a Joe Flacco-esque hot streak. But aside from that, the other thing I would say is the defense. I wrote something about it for Niners Nation the day after the game because I knew everybody would be talking about Jimmy, and deservedly so. I'm not trying to take any credit away. I wanted to give some shine to the guys on the defense because I thought the way that defense played in the second half gave the offense a chance to rebound and allowed them to kind of come back out of that hole and get into a rhythm. And it just was the embodiment of something that I've spent all year writing about, and we've talked about a bunch on here. Like when this team's on, they are so damn good. They're so hard to beat. And they put it really together in the second half and overtime. And it really, like, I don't say it makes you upset because they won the game, but it really makes you wonder like how good they would be and what the season would have looked like if they were able to consistently play like that for the entire 60 minutes. So I had a range of emotions in this game, dude. I just was all over the place. But at the end of the day, the defense stepped up. I thought Jimmy, regardless of what happens in the playoffs, barring some disastrous performance, which I personally don't really see happening, I think that he leaves a good mark because I was, as somebody who's admittedly wanted to move on from him for quite a long time, I was kind of sitting there like, man, this is kind of a bummer. This is how he's going out. Dude's going out pretty sad. And he shut everybody up, and I just have to tip my cap to him. I thought that it was a phenomenal performance.
Absolutely. And you touched on something that Kyle Juszczyk brought to the light. Kyle actually said today at the podium that he was surprised that Jimmy told the story and said it in the way that he did. What in the story goes, Kyle Juszczyk goes up to Jimmy Garoppolo before the Rams game and says, man, this is our last regular season game together. And Jimmy Garoppolo was talking about how it made it emotional and like how both Kyle and Jimmy on some of those drives, third down conversions, touchdowns, were literally living in the moment as like, man, this could be it. This could be the last time that we play football together. And if you think about it, Juice and Jimmy and Kittle and guys like that, they've been together for 5 years. And that's saying something for the NFL, which stands for not for long. So when these guys have been together for so long, it's starting to mean a lot to them, and they're talking about it and they're bringing the consciousness to it. Do you think going into the playoffs and throughout the rest of the playoffs now with the Cowboys coming up, do you think that's going to be a little bit added, piece of motivation for the team, just understanding what they've went through all year and how any game that they either win the Super Bowl and or unfortunately maybe get bounced, it could be the last game that they play with Jimmy. Do you think that is going to be some extra motivation for them?
Yeah, and I don't think it's just Jimmy. I was thinking in my car coming home yesterday, I was driving home from work, and I was thinking about how there's so many guys on one-year deals, right? And I was kind of wondering about, because it was after I had read that story, and I was thinking a little bit about that earlier. I have to feel like there are so many guys that were on that Super Bowl team that were, that are on one-year deals where their future's kind of up in the air right now, that have to kind of be feeling like, hey, this is probably our last chance with the majority. Obviously, it's not the same exact team as 2019. There's impact players like Buckner and Ford who aren't going to be playing in these playoffs or who aren't on the team anymore. But there are still a lot of guys, and this kind of feels like it's like one last ride with this group where they can kind of right the ship and get that redemption and that, I won't say it because I hated the revenge tour, slogan or whatever you want to coin it as last year.
Right.
But I understood the motivation behind that. And I just think that there is an added sense of these guys really do care about each other. And that gets said a lot, sorry. And you'd like to think that most teams are tight knit. It's not that way all the time. And I think that this team, they genuinely care about one another. They genuinely have a tight bond. And Jimmy is he's the quarterback. He's the guy that's been under the most scrutiny and under his situation gets a lot more attention than maybe a safety or a tackle or a guard or somebody that's on similar situation where their future with the team is kind of up in the air. But I just think that there are so many impact guys going into next season that you don't know if they'll be back, that they all kind of have to be rallying around, hey, we know what we're capable of doing. The majority of this team just was in the Super Bowl and minutes away from winning it a couple years ago. Let's get on the road. Let's shock the world. Let's start winning in Dallas, and let's start this, and I don't want to get ahead of myself here because Dallas is a very tough opponent and the 49ers have a big challenge up ahead. But just the way it would have to go, like they would have to beat Dallas and then they would have to go to Lambeau to beat Green Bay. Like this is just shaping up to be like the ultimate kind of like team of destiny thing if they can pull it off, especially for Niners fans that grew up watching the Cowboys and the Packers be a thorn in the side for Niners fans for years. So I just think that it's shaping up for them to really make some noise. And I think just the way that this team is built, they're capable of doing so. But yeah, I definitely think there's an added sense of, like the human element where these guys really do want to give the extra effort and really are fired up. Trent Williams was saying his voice was still so hoarse in the press conference yesterday, I think it was, because he was screaming so loud on the sidelines on Sunday. Like these guys are really fired up. And again, it comes back to what I've been saying all year. Making the playoffs is a big deal. Like NFL players understand how hard it is to get in the postseason. Some fans take it for granted, and I'm not saying all, I'm just saying some because I've seen it. Right. I've had these discussions. These people make it very known that playoffs don't impress them. For the players, this is a huge deal, and I think that they will sell out for one another. And sometimes that slight bit of extra effort, like you played the game, Brad, like that slight bit of, going the extra mile for one another ultimately can be the difference in a game. So I'm really excited to see how they approach this going forward.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. This is a tight-knit group, and they're energized and ready to go forward with the really tough matchup that you kind of alluded to against the Dallas Cowboys. And I know you've looked at this situation in depth and from multiple angles. When you look at the Dallas Cowboys, offense, defense, coaching, what avenue are you most concerned about when you look at the overall team? What is something that sticks out to you where you're like, this is something where I think the 49ers need to give a little bit extra focus to?
I mean, I don't want to be like super simple, but just really Dak Prescott and those receivers. They unfortunately lost Michael Gallup, who was, in my opinion, the best third wide receiver in the entire league. But Cedric Wilson steps in, and he could be a number 2 on a lot of teams. Like they just have so much.
He's really good.
Yeah, he's a really good player. Obviously, Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb are very talented. Jarwin is very good as well. Schultz is a good tight end. Like they have explosive playmakers. And then obviously that combo of Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard are also very talented. I think Dak Prescott's unquestionably a top 10 quarterback. I think he has moments where he looks like a top 5 quarterback. So that offense just as a whole, but particularly the passing offense is the thing I would be most concerned about. The Cowboys have been, for whatever reason, they've drawn the most pass interference penalties in the league. And then obviously most 49ers fans know they've committed the most pass interference penalties in the league. So my biggest concern isn't necessarily them getting beat or giving up explosive plays. It's them giving up free yards via pass interference and getting, grabby and holding down the field. Like that would be my biggest concern going into this game, is making sure not to commit mental mistakes because you're overcompensating, trying to rein in an extremely explosive skill position group for the Cowboys.
Absolutely. And that skill position group, I mean, we scouted them all. We scouted CeeDee Lamb heavily. CeeDee Lamb's one of my favorite players in the league right now, so we know how dangerous he can be. But talk a little bit about those running backs running behind that offensive line. You got Zeke, who everyone knows, but you also got Tony Pollard back there. And decent offensive line. I would say they're pretty solid. They have some good pieces, including highlighted by Zach Martin and Tyron Smith. But what do you see from that run game from Dallas? And is that something that could be a thorn in the 49ers side in regards to the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, it absolutely could. The Cowboys had one of the better offensive lines in football this past season. Tyron Smith is playing at a level it seems like he hasn't been at for years and used to be, in my opinion, the best left tackle in football.
Yeah. Right.
Zach Martin's arguably the best guard in football. I think you can make a strong case that he is. And they have a unit that has the potential to take over games. And Ezekiel Elliott, for as much as people are down on him, he is a guy that just has produced year in and year out and is capable of going off at any point in time. And they have a little bit of that like thunder and lightning dynamic where he may not be as explosive as he once was, but Tony Pollard certainly is. So I think, yeah, like that combination could certainly throw them for a loop. And as much as the 49ers have been really good in recent weeks, their run defense has been actually among the best in the NFL over the last 10 weeks or so. They also did show a propensity early to have a little bit of a hole in that part of their game, for lack of a better word. But do I expect it? No, but I do think that there is a range of outcome where the Cowboys just have a lot of success running the ball, or maybe the 49ers overcompensate playing against, those skill position guys on the outside and the Cowboys take advantage of it. But I have the utmost confidence that the 49ers will figure it out. Ever since Armstead started playing the majority of his snaps inside, he and DJ Jones have been absolute game wreckers. The Rams running backs ran the ball 26 times for 47 yards, I believe, which is good for 1.7 yards a carry, which is just abysmal. Like the 49ers absolutely shut down Sony Michel and Cam Akers. Yeah. So I think that they have shown in recent weeks that they definitely have the ability to shut teams down. And that really is a big deal because, I don't want to just state the obvious here, but when you're able to win on first and second down and get teams in 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, these 3rd and long situations where they're going to have to pass the ball most likely, that's when you're really able to get creative, and D'Amico Ryans can start scheming up these exotic pressures, and you can put Arden Key over a guard. You can move Nick Bosa around, and you can really just allow these guys to pin their ears back and tee off on Dak Prescott on that offensive line, knowing that a pass is probably coming, and they don't have to worry about a draw player, biting too hard on a play fake or anything like that. So I think that if they're able to win on first and second down and stop that running game just like they did against the Rams, because again, even in that Rams game, they did that, and they got beat a couple times on 3rd down. But you still would rather take those chances and force a team. Like Matt Stafford made a couple of big-time throws on 3rd and long. I would much rather be in a position where I'm forcing them to make those throws than be, obviously in the 3rd and short where the playbook is much more open for Kellen Moore and the Cowboys.
Absolutely. And with the return of K'Wan Williams, obviously Emmanuel Moseley and his triumphant return to the starting lineup was able to get a pick there off Stafford, but also the emergence of Ambry Thomas and again the return of KK. Do you think that is going to be something where they're going to actually match up pretty well? Obviously, we already talked a little bit about the wide receivers and CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, Cedric Wilson, and company, even Dalton Schultz, throw him into the mix, and Jarwin. But when you look at the cornerbacks for the San Francisco 49ers, and with them getting healthy, obviously KK comes back, Ambry Thomas, and you get Emmanuel Moseley back. Do you feel pretty solid with that defensive back group, especially with guys on the back end like Jimmy Ward and Kowalski?
Yes, I will feel confident as long as those two are on the field together because of how much they solidify the back end, and just the chemistry and communication those two have is simply unmatched. Kyle Posey and I believe Akash did too, both from Niners Nation. Both of those guys do fantastic work. Posted a clip from the Texans game where the Texans were running a double post concept, and Tart noticed it mid-play and basically was calling out to Jimmy Ward what they were running mid-play, which allowed them both to be in the proper position and get into a spot where they're able to break up the pass, didn't go for a completion, and that kind of communication on the fly, like having the IQ to recognize that is just another one of the many long list of things that makes Jaquiski Tartt very underrated and a very good player. But the ability to have that communication and on the fly in that split second communicate with Ward and both of them get into position, that's extremely difficult to do, and it's extremely valuable. So as long as those two are on the field, I think it obviously helps whatever is in front of them. I think that Thomas, he's a rookie. He's going through some growing pains here and there, but he's looked much more comfortable week after week. He's starting to make plays on the football more frequently. He obviously had that big game-sealing interception. So I imagine he's playing with much more confidence. Having said that, I don't fault the guy in the slightest if he gets beat a couple times here and there. Again, he's going up against two of the better wide receivers in the league. Dak Prescott's a great quarterback. They're going to win their fair share of reps as well. I just think as long as he's able to limit those and not be a consistent, somebody that the Cowboys are repeatedly targeting, trying to exploit, I think they'll be okay. Emmanuel Mosley coming back was huge for them too. He's so good. He doesn't get the love he deserves, I feel like, at times. He has 11 pass breakups in 11 games, which is a phenomenal number. And, it looks like K'Wan Williams will be back too. So I think they'll be a little bit more comfortable. They actually had to roll out Darqueze Dennard in that game against the Rams. And he was on the team for, I think, like 10 days or something like that on the practice squad. Right. So they were really thin there. So I think just having those guys back gives them a better chance. But at the same time, the Cowboys are still going to get some numbers. They're still going to put up points. It's just a matter of limiting those and keeping yourself in the game, because I don't think there's a scenario where the 49ers go in and absolutely clamp this explosive Cowboys offense and shut them down entirely. They're just too good. But if you're able to limit it, you're able to not allow them to come out like the Rams did and string 3 scoring drives back to back to back to start the game. I think they'll be in a good spot in this one.
Absolutely. Texas boy, he's saying it's an easy win for the Cowboys. The 49ers are one-dimensional. How could the 49ers come away with the win against the Cowboys? Oh, I can't wait. We're going to find out. Keep talking. I love it. Tell me a little bit about Nick Bosa. We're going to transition this into some of the news that we had today and then talk about if there could be a little extra juice that comes from Nick Bosa not getting named to the All-Pro list. First of all, I want to get your take on the thought. Does it make sense to you? Obviously, the guys who got placed and voted above him, Max Crosby and Robert Quinn from the Bears. What is your thought about Nick Bosa getting left off the AP All-Pro list? And then does that have any extra motivation? And how do you kind of anticipate that D-line unit working against that Cowboys unit being headed by Nick Bosa?
So TJ Watt tied the sack record. He had a respectable amount. He had like 64 pressures, I think 67 pressures, something like that. He was on a depleted defensive line on a not great team, in my opinion. I thought the Steelers significantly overachieved. So I think it's fine he made it. I thought Myles Garrett had a really good season as well. I think he was more deserving. Not more deserving, but I think he was certainly deserving. The people that 49ers fans keep coming after is Max Crosby, and I get it. There's a rift between Niners fans and Raiders fans that will never cease to exist. I get it. Nope. What I try to do is set any of that. I personally have never really had animosity towards the Raiders. They don't play in the same division nor the same conference as the 49ers. And the last time I saw them play, Nick Mullins sliced them up for 34 points and embarrassed them on us. So
Bay champions, let's go.
I don't consider, for me, that was the end of it. I stopped caring. The rivalry's over. They play in Vegas now. I don't care. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't have this weird animosity towards the Raiders. I respect anybody who does. I couldn't care less, truthfully. But having said that, Max Crosby led the NFL in pressures this year. He had 101 pressures. That is an absurd number. It was 16 more than the nearest player, which was Aaron Donald, I think, with 85. I am of the train of thought that pressures, to me, are more reflective of a player's individual impact rushing the passer than sacks are. Sacks are so heavily dependent on outside factors. Quarterbacks,
they are very opportunistic.
Offensive line, the way they'll move in the pocket. Maybe I can post dozens of clips of Nick Bosa wreaking havoc and creating pressure and somebody else on the 49ers cleaning up with the sack, or any other number of players doing the same thing. But when you have a significant amount of pressures, it really signifies that you are consistently getting after the passer. And I made the same argument in 2019 for Nick Bosa, when Nick Bosa had an abundance. He had like 80-something pressures, I believe. I know he set the record for rookies recording pressures that season, but he had 10 sacks during the season. 10 sacks wasn't at all reflective of how good Nick Bosa was that year. And that was everybody's argument. Was like, oh, well, he doesn't have that many sacks. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to be consistent. In the same way I defended Nick Bosa, I will defend Max Crosby here and say that I think he's deserving of a spot. So I think the problem is that 49ers fans think it has to be Crosby or Bosa. And I think that Raiders fans have a huge part of this too. Raiders fans will go out of their way to try to make these comparisons and say how much better Crosby is than Bosa. For the record, I would take Nick Bosa on my team 10 times out of 10 over Max Crosby. I think Crosby's a good player, but I think Bosa's generational. Here's my thing, is that 49ers fans should be directing their disdain and their frustrations at whoever voted for Robert Quinn. Robert Quinn had 18.5 sacks for the Bears. I get it. That's a high number. There were so many times this season where I saw clips of Quinn getting a sack where it was, again, outside factors, people running right into him, quarterbacks falling down. He had 47 pressures. So Bosa had 75 and Max Crosby had 101. Max Crosby created a pressure 101 times, more than double the amount of times as Robert Quinn did. But Robert Quinn had more sacks. So that's like, this is my whole thing is I'm not going to hold it against players that the people voting for this are seemingly reliant on an archaic stat that doesn't tell the full pressure or full picture, the way that I believe pressures do, and just simply watching. Like, if you just watch games, like Max Crosby's a really good player. Again, I think Nick Bosa is better, but to me, it should have been Crosby and Bosa, not Crosby or Bosa. And with all due respect to Robert Quinn, 49ers fans remember he was good on the Rams for a number of years. I think he's been a quality player for a long time. I'm not that impressed by 18 and a half sacks when you only have 47 pressures. Comparatively, when you're comparing it against guys like Bosa and Crosby that have these enormous pressure numbers that are flashing on film, that are, getting double teams. And in Robert Quinn's defense, he was getting double teamed quite a bit. Like he also, it's not like he was on some star-studded line. Khalil Mack missed the majority of the season. He was getting a lot of focus. But I just think that all the anger and frustration directed towards Crosby, if it's me, it's Crosby and Bosa. Quinn would be the guy that gets left out. And I just think just because there's two factors, Crosby plays for the Raiders, and I think Raiders fans have gone out of their way to try to have this debate about Bosa or Crosby, when pretty much anybody who's objective in this league would probably pick Nick Bosa because, again, he's a generational kind of talent. And I think Max Crosby's really good, but Nick Bosa's, again, generational. I don't throw that word around lightly. So I just think that there's so much frustration around Bosa missing, and people are unwilling to recognize how good Max Crosby was this year because of it, when in all actuality, we should be upset that Crosby and Bosa both weren't honored. And no disrespect to Robert Quinn, but you see Trent Williams absolutely manhandling him right here. And that's not anything against Robert Quinn, because Trent Williams is going to do that to 99% of the people he goes up against. But again, it just comes back to where it felt like somebody saw, oh, Robert Quinn had 18 and a half sacks this year. Let me go ahead and throw my all-pro. Like, he was like 23rd or 24th. He was tied for that too. And there's a bunch of, so he realistically was around the 30th ranked player at the edge position specifically in generating pressures this year. That to me doesn't signify an all-pro level player, an all-pro level season. Kudos to him. I hope he gets a lot of money for it because there's nothing that can change now. I'm not going to sit here and just drag Robert Quinn for something that he had no part in. He just went out there and played football. I'm just saying, if it was me personally, I would put more stock in the tape and the pressures if I'm relying on numbers than I would just looking at going, oh, he had 18 and a half sacks. Like, that to me doesn't matter as much.
I think that is probably the best argument amongst all the back and forth that I've seen about this topic. I think Jordan just won. I think you can put down the swords. I think he won because I think that's a great point. It's a shiny stat thing, especially with Robert Quinn, because if you go back to just our game, the San Francisco 49ers versus the Cowboys, or not the Cowboys, the Bears this year, Robert Quinn, like right here, you got Trent Williams absolutely folding him, but it wasn't the only instance. You had Charlie Warner pancaking this guy. You had, like, he did not do a whole lot against the San Francisco 49ers, their tight ends or their offense. Obviously, he's had success and nothing to take away from the guy. But again, we get real feisty when one of our boys misses out on a prestigious award. It comes with the territory. But I think, Jordan, dude, I think you killed that argument, and I see no problems with it.
I will say, can I add real quick too? I posted the pressure numbers, and I posted this on Twitter when I had a break earlier, and immediately people were just like, oh, well, Crosby only had 8 sacks and this and that. And I'm like, dude, again, this shouldn't be about comparing Bosa and Crosby. They both deserve the all-pro nod. Crosby had a very good season, and you can sit there and ignore, like, there's a lot of people with differing opinions. That's totally fine. But one thing that does kind of get me, and I understand people are going to be loyal to 49ers fans, but I have seen just from my experiences on social media, I'm on Twitter quite a bit, and, comment sections from shows I do and comments on articles I write. It seems like there's a big reluctance for 49ers fans to give credit to players on other teams. And I just want to say that, like, for me, I'm a fan of the sport of football. Like, I love the game of football. The 49ers are the team I grew up rooting for. They're the team that I've been surrounded by the most in my life. I understand being loyal to your team, but you can absolutely say that Max Crosby had a good season while still thinking Nick Bosa is a better player and just as deserving of an all-pro nod. It doesn't have to be one or the other. And I think that that's something that's a problem, not just in the 49ers fan base, but in sports in general, is we're far too quick to tear down another player to build up another one when you can give flowers to both and just say that, maybe Bosa deserves 13 flowers and Max deserves a dozen. Like, there's nothing wrong with giving them both their recognition. You don't have to tear down another player to make Nick Bosa look really good. Nick Bosa is going to be a great player regardless. And it's okay to say that, hey, Max Crosby had a really good season. I'd still take Nick Bosa over him because that's exactly how I feel. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Absolutely. I think you killed that argument. Jordan wins. Put down your swords. I think that's the argument right there. I know, again, it's a focus on Max Crosby. It's a focus on Raiders versus 49ers. Again, those two have been linked because they came on the same draft as well, I believe. I think Crosby was a 5th round pick. Obviously, Bosa was number 2 overall. So it's quite a big snub. But do you see that potentially? I mean, we talk about the human element of football. These are alpha competitors. And when they get publicly snubbed, and let's face it, like you said, Bosa's generational. He had a great year, really phenomenal year. I mean, 15 and a half sacks, led the NFL in tackle for losses, the most double-teamed defensive lineman in the NFL. How do you see that potentially transitioning? Can they take that energy and can they throw that against that offensive line against Dallas? Obviously, Armstead, Maurice Hurst is healthy, so we could see a little bit of Maurice Hurst. Arden Key and his development and dominance with DJ Jones. Talk about that whole D-line unit and what they could do and potentially be even a difference maker in that game against the Cowboys coming up.
Yeah, so I think that Bosa will definitely have, like, obviously he's going to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, and I don't blame the guy because this is the second time he's had a season where he's looked like just an absolutely phenomenal player. Again, generational. Like, Trent Williams has gone up against a number of players in his time, and he has, I believe he said that Aldon Smith was like the toughest, like, individual player he went up against. But he said over the course of practice, he's never gone up against a guy with a bag. Like, I'm sorry if I'm misquoting, but I remember him saying something along the lines of basically saying that, like, Bosa has the most refined set of moves that he's ever gone up against repeatedly. And I just think that Bosa is a player that, again, is so special. And to do all this stuff, like, he had 15 and a half sacks and tied for the league lead in tackles for loss a year coming off his ACL surgery. Like, if he was able to play half the snaps this year and just get through the year and not hurt, I think a lot of 49ers fans would have taken that before the season. He not only did that, he went out and he looked as good, if not better than he did when he burst onto the scene as a rookie. So, yeah, I think that there'll be some, added fuel there. I think some of these guys, they don't need it, but it definitely doesn't hurt. Like, I don't think that Bosa was just coming in like, oh, I made the all, like, if he made the all-pro team, he just would have, came out and played flat. But yeah, I think it adds a little bit of fire. And if we remember 2019, Bosa was good during the regular season. He was sensational during the playoffs. That's really when he kind of skyrocketed into the superstar tier and he really showed out. So, when the lights are bright, he is a guy who shows up. And I'll be really interested to see where they end up putting Bosa for this game because I would put him over guards, put him on the right side.
They did that against the Rams. They put Bosa over the guard, and I was like, they did it.
So I think I would be okay moving him around. I think he is more than capable. Like, he seems pretty confident. I think that there is something, because he said during a press conference, he gave credit to this Cowboys offensive line, and I believe Tyron Smith, who I believe will be a Hall of Famer one day. He's a phenomenal player.
Oh, yeah.
But
I think he was like kind of the gold standard, and then Trent Williams came along, and it became a conversation of those two.
He will, absolutely. And I think Bosa said something along the lines, and again, I'm sorry for not having the direct quote. He said something along the lines of, yeah, they're fantastic, but I've seen tape. I know I've seen ways that they can be beat. And I think that there is something very specific that he will go to. There's a move that he's going to rely on. Again, he has this deep bag. There's something that he feels really confident about, it seems like, that he's seen on tape. Because, again, no matter how good some of these players are, there's always something that you can kind of exploit. There's always a weakness to be found. And not just for this matchup, but for the game in general, part of the reason why I love all sports, all right? Like I love football, I love all sports, but one of the reasons why I just have this love for football that kind of supersedes all else is that it doesn't just come down to who is the most talented in a given situation. It is so heavily dependent on matchups. And that old saying, like, styles make fights. And when you have a guy like Nick Bosa who has that deep bag, when you have a guy like Arden Key who seamlessly just transitioned to rushing from the interior after never doing that in his career and then doing it at an elite level out of nowhere, when you have Samson Ebukam getting red hot, when you have Eric Armstead wrecking games from the interior, and then on top of it, you have Kevin Givens, Contavious Street, DJ Jones, Jordan Willis, like these Charles Omenihu, like you just have wave after wave that you can throw out at this Cowboys offensive line over the game. I think that the style and the matchup is something like this is why I feel so good about the 49ers in this game. I think top to bottom, you could definitely make the argument the Cowboys are the better team. I think it'd be a really interesting discussion. The Cowboys are a great team. I just think that personally, this matchup is what makes the 49ers so intriguing, and which is why I think you see a lot of pundits following them. I saw Michael Irvin was like, this was literally the worst possible outcome for the Cowboys in this round. This is the team that they would want to face the least because he's well aware styles make fights, and this matchup for the 49ers, I think, plays exactly into what they want to do, and it takes away from the game the Cowboys want to play if the 49ers are able to execute. So I'm really excited to see how it unfolds.
Absolutely. And if you guys are enjoying this conversation, this preview of the 49ers versus Cowboys, do me a favor and like up this video. We're at 45. I know the Sourdough Squad can get those likes up. So do what you do in the chat. Smash that like button and get this thing juiced up because there's still plenty more to talk about, Jordan. What are some of the things that you've been able to pinpoint and see maybe from a stylistic perspective of how the 49ers and the Cowboys are a good matchup and why this could, like you said, the Cowboys are freaking talented. Like we talked a lot about the offense already, but hey, Trayvon Diggs, say what you want about him. He's first team All Pro. Micah Parsons, rookie, first team All Pro. Don't even forget they got Randy Gregory, DeMarcus Lawrence. I like Leighton Vander Esch. He might have taken a step back the last couple years. I still like him. They have some talent. So what are some stylistic things and how they match up well, and maybe some things that the 49ers can try to exploit just based on how they match up with the Dallas Cowboys?
I think that the Cowboys are a team that would have been, like, hypothetically, if they had to play like the Rams this week, if I was a Cowboys fan, I would feel much more confident in that matchup because to me, the Cowboys have feasted all year on opposing teams, giving them opportunities to take advantage of turnovers. They led the league in points off of turnovers with 121, I believe. And they led the league in turnovers forced at 34 and turnover differential at plus 14. So I think that they are a team that really has, taken advantage of generating turnovers and turning that into something positive. This is where I would be concerned as a Cowboys fan in this game. Yes, Jimmy Garoppolo has games where he just doesn't seem right, and he throws a bunch of turnover-worthy balls. He fumbles. He takes sacks. He shouldn't. He has games where he's off. If you're a Cowboys fan and that happens, guess what? This plays right into your hands. This is exactly where your defense wants to be, and you probably take advantage of that, and you probably win the game. This is what you don't want. You don't want the 49ers to come out physical, have Kyle Shanahan dialing up some shot plays here and there, getting creative. He had Deebo Samuel throw a touchdown pass last week. Like, we're just getting into Kyle's bag as we're rolling into the playoffs. And what you don't want as a Cowboys fan is the 49ers basically saying, we're going to put the ball in Elijah Mitchell, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk's hands. We're going to get them the ball in space, and we're going to force you to make tackles in the open field one-on-one. Because to me, that is where Dallas struggles the most. There's tape that backs it up, and there's numbers that back it up, that while they're not abysmal, they're certainly not an elite tackling team. And I could just see a scenario where Kyle, I don't think it'll be quite like the NFC Championship game, but I can see a scenario where Kyle just feels comfortable consistently, not necessarily running the ball, but getting the ball out quick, really relying on that quick passing game, getting Garoppolo into a rhythm where he's not asking him to take shots downfield, where he's not asking him to make throws that are going to give the Cowboys opportunistic defense a chance to really thrive on those turnovers. Because obviously, turnovers are going to hurt you in any game. Like, that's me stating the obvious. I get it. But when you're playing a team that is so heavily reliant on creating turnovers for their defense, I think that it just plays into Kyle, what we know Kyle wants to do, which is if Kyle had his way, he would run the ball every single snap. And that's not a slight on Jimmy Garoppolo. That's just the way the guy is wired. He and Mike McDaniel are so good designing run plays that I think in their ideal scenario here, they're running the ball 35, 40 times. They're giving Deebo Samuel these quick screens, these, carries out of the backfield, and really forcing these Cowboys defenders to make a play. The one that really stood out to me was the secondary, particularly at corner. Again, this is for what it's worth. I'm not sitting here I'm not going to just sit here and cite PFF grades because I'm not a huge fan of the way they go about their grading process at times. But for, lack of being able to post a season's worth of film, they graded Trayvon Diggs at 81st out of 82 qualified corners. And that's based on, playing 50% or more of your team's in run defense grade. Coverage, he was not, they weren't high on him in coverage, but I don't want to take away from Trayvon Diggs. I think he's a good player. I think he's particularly opportunistic when, those 50-50 balls get thrown. I don't want to really take away from that, but he's going to be forced. Like, this is where Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel are so good. They not only are good play callers, Kyle, to me, is arguably a better play designer than a play caller. And he's the guy that I would look to that can get these Cowboys defenders who may not be great in a certain position and isolate them and make them be the force player, make them be the player who has to step up and make a play in space. And sure, is Trayvon Diggs capable of tackling Deebo Samuel? You bet. If you ask him to do it 5 or 6 times over the course of a game, I don't blame that man at all for not being able to do it because Deebo Samuel is a freaking superhuman and you think about that, hey, let's say you're able to corral Deebo Samuel. Guess what? Now you have to try and tackle George Kittle in the open field one-on-one. Like, this to me is where the 49ers really need to live. They need to live in an area where they're just making Dallas play fundamental football and tackle these absolutely explosive playmakers that are so physical and so hard to bring down in the open field. And I mentioned it yesterday. Daniel Jeremiah, who does the Move the Six podcast, he summed it up better than I can. He basically said, if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'm not worrying about Trayvon Diggs covering Deebo Samuel. Trayvon Diggs has been good in coverage. I'm not worried about that. I'm making Trayvon Diggs worry about how is he going to tackle Deebo Samuel. And we've seen whether it's drift routes, screens, these quick in-breaking routes over the middle, they can get Deebo Samuel the ball in space. And I just think if you are the Cowboys and you're in a position where you're repeatedly forced to tackle Kittle and Deebo in the open field, that's not the kind of football you want to play. You want to make the 49ers have to push the ball downfield. You want to live in an area where you're able to drop linebackers over the middle and hope that Jimmy Garoppolo falls into some of his, mistake-prone throws where he may not see a sinking linebacker underneath. And I just think the 49ers...
It's kind of like you want the 49ers to live in 3rd and long, essentially. You want to hold them on 1st and 2nd down and force them to push the ball downfield.
So this is where it gets funny because this is what I think is going to happen, and I could be totally wrong. I think that the Cowboys are going to sell out so heavily to stop the run and get them in those 3rd and longs. And this is where I think you'll see Kyle dial up some stuff where Jimmy will be
under wizard center comes out.
Where he's going to be under center on 1st down, but they're going to throw quick 3-step drops, and they're going to take advantage of these quick in-breaking routes over the middle, getting guys moving in space. And, again, it just comes back to where I think styles make fights. And I think a team like the Rams, where they're going to go empty a bunch, they're going to throw the ball 35, 40 times, that favors far more heavily. You could argue even the Packers, like what they do favors far more heavily into what the Cowboys want to do and how they want to play. I just think that the way that's the physicality that this 49ers team has is not the greatest. I'm not saying the Cowboys can't stop it. Again, they have a very good team. I don't want to be one of these people who's sitting here talking recklessly, saying that they have no shot to stop this. They absolutely do. They have a very talented defense. But I just think that, again, this is the last kind of game that they would want to play. Bucky Brooks had me cracking up. He was saying that he thinks Kyle Shanahan's going to have this looking like an Army-Navy game, where it's just going to be physical in the trenches, run the ball down your throat over and over again. I don't see it quite getting to that because I will say really quickly, I think that Jimmy Garoppolo is coming into this game with a level of confidence that I haven't seen from him in years. And I think that he will enter this game. Maybe there is a little bit of pressure knowing it could be your last game, but I think it will be the opposite of that. I think he's going to play one of the better games we've seen him play. And that doesn't mean he's going to throw for a bunch of yards or throw for a bunch of touchdowns, but I think he's going to be efficient. I think he's going to pilot this offense, and I think he's going to play with a level of confidence that we have not seen from him literally in years. And I don't think that has anything negative in particular about the Cowboys defense. It's not anything that they're not doing. I just think that when you look at the way that he ended last week and the capability they have to get the ball in these playmakers' hands, there's so many ranges of outcomes for this game where you look at it and it's just like Kittle, Ayuk, and Debo just were too much for one team to try to contain. And I will add real quick, Kyle Shanahan and Dan Quinn went up head-to-head for 2 years every day in practice. Dan's defense versus Kyle's offense. These two guys really know each other. So I don't think there will be a whole lot of surprise. Obviously, a lot's changed for both over the last 5 years. They've evolved and developed. But it's going to be really interesting because it's not a situation where it's like, oh, man, this is the first time that they've seen this kind of offense, or, oh, man, this is the first time I've seen this, single high cover 3 defense. Like, these guys are really familiar with each other. So it's going to be really interesting to see maybe if Dan Quinn can exploit some stuff that he knows Kyle might not be, particularly great at, or if Kyle knows there's an area of his Dan's defense that he can exploit. Like, there's a tremendous amount of familiarity between these two. So it's going to be a really fun matchup regardless.
I mean, you talked about it a little bit earlier, just kind of like the cosmic connection that is seemingly aligning with the matchup. I mean, we've talked about it before. The 40th is this week, the 40th anniversary of the catch against Dallas, and we have Dallas in the playoffs, all kinds of crazy stuff. Obviously, like you talked about, the scheme is going to be something that's going to be very interesting to monitor and to watch. And Justin, actually, this is a question that I also had for you, but Justin is bringing it to the table. He says, do you think Kyle schemes around Micah Parsons like he did Kuechly in 2019? And or do you just see like Micah Parsons being a pivotal piece in which where he lines up, they are either running away from him and or trapping him? Do you see him being like, do you think Kyle from a schematic standpoint is going to view that matchup in the sense of trying to neutralize Parsons, or is he just going to treat it like another guy? How do you kind of envision seeing that chess piece play out?
I don't feel like Kyle really shies away from play. Like, they play Aaron Donald twice a year, and they don't really seem to shy away from running the ball to his side.
No, they leave Brunskill on an island with him all the time.
They don't really, to me, go into games particularly trying to do that. They might have plays where they recognize like, hey, Parsons is a hell of a player. We can attack the other side where they're not, maybe not as talented. I think for me, the biggest thing I would watch for, and Micah Parsons is an incredible player. I think he had some, off the field stuff that, people make mistakes when you're young, you're mature. I'm not perfect. I made mistakes too. I don't hold judgment against him, but I think that people got away from how good of a player he was and let that kind of cloud their judgment of him, because he was the best defensive player in the country going into that draft season. Like he far and away was a guy that looked like a generational athlete, and he's an extremely talented player. He can play linebacker on base downs. They've put him at edge. He's, been
he can play everywhere.
He's a phenomenal player. If I'm Kyle Shanahan, the thing that I would try to use against Micah Parsons is his own motor. And that's the biggest thing that stood out to me about Parsons is he has an extremely high motor. This guy is so gifted, and every play it feels like he's bringing 110%. I would try to get him in a position where maybe he's over pursuing a little bit, whether that's, them coming out, running some draw plays, running some counters, that toss back to the inside that they've been doing. I would not necessarily not scheme. Like, I don't think Kyle's going to scheme away from him, but I think he will try to use his own over aggressiveness against him. And Micah Parsons is a fantastic player, even as a rookie. He might be able to overcome that, but I'm not sitting here and thinking any less of Micah Parsons if he's coming out at 110 miles per hour, running one way, and all of a sudden the ball is going the other. Because Kyle Shanahan is a wizard, and he has been tricking the best defensive minds in the league for over a decade now. So I think if that makes sense, that's kind of what I would expect. I would think that Kyle will try to take advantage of his, his want to just run through the 49ers offensive line and blow up plays in the backfield and take advantage of that over aggressiveness. And the fact that as good as Parsons has been, he's only been in the league for one season. And there is a level of comfortability that no matter how good you are, Nick Bosa even said, yeah, I was just figuring it out my rookie year. He's gotten tremendously better in year 3 now. Like, as good as these guys are their rookie year, they still have so much to learn. And when you have the just brain power of a Kyle Shanahan and a Mike McDaniel in the lab cooking up plays all week, I could see them using Parsons' own extremely high motor, which is a good thing. I'm not sitting here dissing Micah Parsons at all. Right. Like, he is a phenomenal player, and Cowboys fans should be extremely excited about the future with him on their defense. It reminds me a little bit, and it's not quite the same because they're used differently. Isaiah Simmons comes in as this guy who's highly touted, who could play all over, as this freak athlete. The Cardinals have him. And what did Kyle Shanahan do in that week 1 game last season? He immediately threw Raheem Mostert out running a choice route against him and had Simmons looking this way while Mostert's running that way. And he goes 75 yards for a touchdown. And I believe there was another play in that game that was an explosive play. And it felt like Kyle kind of just was like, hey, I respect that you're a gifted athlete. I'm going to make you prove that you belong on this level. While I don't think Micah Parsons has anything to prove to anyone after being the player he was this year, I do think that there is a little bit of a there's room for Kyle Shanahan to kind of test him and see what he can get away with and maybe use, again, that aggressiveness against himself.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's a really good point because Micah Parsons is a really good athlete and he's everywhere and he's very instinctual and he typically lands in the right spot. But one of the things that we've come to love about Kyle Shanahan is he's constantly getting these linebackers flowing one way and undercutting and going backside and doing different kinds of things. Again, we're seeing him incorporate inside pitch runs where actually everything looks like it's an outside pitch, but in reality, it's a run right up the middle. And it just gets linebackers flowing into the wrong spot, and then you just cut it off and run backside. So I agree. I think that's a great opportunity and kind of use his own momentum against him. I could definitely see that. So do you see this from an offensive standpoint? Is this like a Deebo Samuel? Is this a Elijah Mitchell game, both on the ground and through the air? Like, does it seem like those two guys are going to be key pieces in beating this pretty solid Dallas defense?
I think it's a George Kittle game. I think we're going to see Kittle have the best game
I
of his
like that.
receiving career. I think this will be a game where Kittle really makes a statement and reminds people where it's one of those games where it's like, oh man, how have we forgotten about George Kittle? Not saying that anybody forgets about George Kittle, but
I mean, he didn't get named to All-Pro list,
yeah,
but it is what it is.
It's going to be one of those games where people kind of remember like, oh, like this guy is, arguably the best tight end in the entire sport. I think he's going to be the guy that really goes off in this game. I think there will be a lot of attention paid to Deebo Samuel. And again, Trayvon Diggs is a really good player. If they have Trayvon Diggs, shadowing him or staying on his side, whatever, I could see him giving some problems, especially if they're trying to push the ball downfield. I don't know who I would look at on that Cowboys defense where I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, I'm really worried that they're going to, keep Greg Kittle, in check. They're going to clamp him down. And he's not going to get a lot of looks. They might bracket him, but this is the thing now. This is why the emergence of Deebo Samuel has been so big, because for the last couple of years, George Kittle has been the 49ers' primary option in the passing game. You could argue he still is. The production obviously favors Deebo this year, and Deebo deserves his flowers. First team All-Pro. He is a phenomenal player. But I think that George Kittle still has that ability to be instead of a 1 or an A and a B, it's a 1A and a 1B type situation. And I think that with the amount of attention that has to be focused on Deebo, with the amount of attention that Brandon Ayuk must be, given now, given his late season resurgence, it leaves things a little bit open for Kittle. So it turns into a situation where I don't see a world where the Cowboys defense is going to effectively be able to shut down all three. And they're going to kind of have to pick their poison in terms of who they want to really divert a bunch of resources towards. So I would imagine it would be Deebo just because of the creative ways they could use him. The problem with that is that it feels like even when when he's in the backfield, you can pretty much bank on him getting the ball, just like it felt like for the longest time. Every time he motioned, they did that orbit motion, he never got the ball, but teams still had to account for it. Like, even if they know it's coming, that's got to be the most demoralizing part for a lot of this, is that even like the Rams knew Deebo Samuel was getting the ball in that 3rd and 2 touchdown run. And what did he do? He still, bounced right into the end zone. Like, as much as you can prepare as the Cowboys, preparing throughout the week and having a good plan on paper, it's like, what's that saying? I'm sorry for blanking. I think it's Mike Tyson. Somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. He's like, everybody has a good plan until they get punched in the mouth or hit in the mouth. Like, that's what I think it's like playing the 49ers. You can scheme up stuff all week, but guess what? When you have to tackle Deebo Samuel and George Kittle in the open field, or you have to account for Brandon Ayuk and his cutback ability and his the way he's silky smooth running after the catch, like, all these things are easier said than done when you're in the film room and you're on the practice field and you're feeling great going into the game. Guess what? When you get ran over by Deebo Samuel in the middle of the game, your plans change. And if it keeps happening over and over again, you have to kind of start to doubt, oh man, this stuff we prepared for all week, this isn't working. What do we do now? And it feels like that's what the 49ers have done, is that they haven't been so overly reliant on one player. Like, yes, Deebo Samuel had a generational season. I've written multiple articles about it. We've all talked about it a bunch. He deserves a ton of credit. But the 49ers have also been able to win games where he isn't carrying the entire load. And I think that's what's got to be the most frustrating thing, is that there isn't one particular thing that you can just take away from this Niners team and it effectively shuts them down. Like, for example, the Cardinals, since DeAndre Hopkins has gone out, they have really struggled to maintain any kind of production. The 49ers, when one of their guys doesn't have a great game, somebody else steps up. And it's been that way, it feels like, for the majority of the season, particularly at the skill position spot. So I'm leaning George Kittle game, but I think that it could be any of the three. Honestly, if Ayuk has a huge game here, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. But there's no scenario that I'm looking at where the Cowboys can effectively shut down all three. And I just think that it's so hard. And real quick, I know I've been ranting a bunch about this, but real quick, you have to empathize a bit for opposing defenses. There is no way to replicate Deebo Samuel and walkthroughs during the week. There isn't a player on any team that you can throw out there in pads during practice and replicate George Kittle. The 49ers are
Plus, they don't even tackle in practice. So
exactly. They're so unique in what they're able to do. And then on top of it, you have all the window dressing with the pre-snap motion and getting guys looking one way while running the other. Like, everything they do is just built to confuse and manipulate defenses. And I just think that the sum of all of that and the physicality they play with doesn't mean that they're going to just steamroll the Cowboys, but I think that it puts the Cowboys in a bind where this is not the kind of football that they will feel comfortable playing, and they're going to be the ones forced to adapt. And generally, when the 10-7 team is going on the road to play the 12-5 team in the playoffs, the road team has to adjust. I think the 49ers have a big chance to kind of set the tone early and dictate the way this game is played. Whether or not they do that is obviously, yet to be seen, but it's a huge opportunity to really when you make a team play an uncomfortable style of football that they're not used to playing, that's when mistakes start happening. That's when mental errors start happening and guys are thinking rather than reacting and playing, and you can really exploit a weakness in an otherwise really, really good Cowboys team.
speaking of setting the tone, there has been so much made of 49er fans taking over Levi's South down at SoFi and making it extremely difficult for the Rams offense to operate in that second half. Are you kind of foreseeing maybe a potential outcome where 49er fans show up in droves in Dallas and we potentially see a similar outcome from the faithful in Jerry's world? Do you think that could be another instance where maybe the fans are another aspect to this game that could have an impact?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it'll be quite the same because LA has a massive 49ers fan base. So there's a lot of people who already live in and reside in the Los Angeles, greater Southern California area who went to that game and supported that team. Whereas for this, I know there's plenty of very good diehard 49ers fans in Texas. I don't think it's quite the same ratio. The 49ers, in my opinion, it's either them or the Raiders. It's a toss-up. Have the biggest following in Southern California. It's not the Rams. It's not the Chargers. It's literally those two teams. Yep. So I think that there was a little bit of an inherent advantage there. The 49ers have taken over the Cowboys Stadium, as we've all seen, but I do think it's kind of ironic because I have been to 49ers games, particularly at Candlestick, where Cowboys fans were 50-50. And I remember times being in the bathroom or being in line at Candlestick and hearing an enormous roar from the crowd, and I run out thinking that the Cowboys just threw a pick or turned the ball over, and it was Tony Romo throwing a touchdown to somebody. I remember in the 2011 game very explicitly that the 49ers lost to them. That literally came running back to that little view where you could see from the mezzanine level, and the Cowboys had just scored, but the place was erupting because there were so many Cowboys fans there. So I think both of these teams travel very well, and it's kind of funny that whenever one goes to the other, like when they last played at Levi's, I think it was 2018, ton of Cowboys fans there. So they both travel really well. So it seems like no matter where they end up playing, there's always going to be this kind of split crowd where it may not be exactly even. I don't think it's going to be quite the same because last week it felt like the 49ers fans literally outnumbered the Rams fans. I don't see that happening in Dallas, but I certainly see there being enough 49ers fans in the building where they're giving the Cowboys a hard time on third down. Like, they made the Rams go to a silent count in their own building. We overlook so much of the human element of this. Do you know how frustrating it must have been for the Los Angeles Rams playing in a game where they can lock up the 2 seed, win the division. You were up 17-0 already.
Kick the 49ers out the playoffs.
Keep them out of the playoffs. The only team that you can't beat consistently, and they get you on a silent count in the second half, and you can't even run your offense properly because there's so many fans of the opposing team. I don't see the 49ers having that kind of effect in Dallas, or the 49ers fans, having that kind of effect in Dallas. Again, just because geographically, it's very far from here being the Bay Area, and where a lot of 49ers fans obviously reside. It's tough for people to travel all the way out to the middle of the country there in Texas. So yeah, I would expect, and Cowboys fans, I want to give them credit too. Like, the Cowboys have a very big following too. Like, they weren't just coined America's team for no reason. They have a massive following. They have very dedicated and passionate fans as well. But we will see a lot of red. I think the biggest mistake the Cowboys made was trying to go all in on this whiteout, thing they're doing, to wear your white jerseys, and it looks like they're giving away some kind of white shirt or something in the seats. That's just going to make the red in the stands pop and be that much more evident. I didn't see the logic behind it. I understand that they wear the white jerseys at home. I understand it's an iconic look. I personally wouldn't be going out of my way to tell Cowboys fans to try to fill the stadium with white, because it's going to make that red that the 49ers fans wear that much more apparent. And, if they win the game, the optics don't matter. But during the game, I certainly think it'll be a talking point. And it's got to be kind of demoralizing for the Cowboys if they're sitting there in a close game, or let's say the Niners get out to a lead, and they're sitting there and they're like, man, we just turned the ball over and this place is going nuts. Or the other team just scored and this place is going nuts, and I see red all over the place. Like, the human element comes into play. Like, these guys are human beings at the end of the day, and that stuff does matter.
Oh, yeah. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm super, super excited about this matchup. Is there any other type of thing that sticks out for you looking at this matchup? Something you want to see, or just anything that particularly is something that you've been thinking about heading into this game?
Yes. And I'm pulling up the exact numbers, so I apologize. Greg Zuerlein has missed 6 extra points this year, and he has missed 6 field goals, which, again, everybody misses kicks. Everybody misses field goals. I think that is something to watch, because I think Dallas is an offense that's explosive enough, and we've seen Mike McCarthy be willing to go for it on 4th downs, be willing to take 2-point conversions. Anybody can miss a kick in a given game, but if Zuerlein misses an extra point early, I would be interested to see if maybe Dallas comes out and they score a touchdown, if they're more willing to go for 2, and how that plays out. And again, Robbie Gould's missed his fair share of kicks. Every NFL kicker misses kicks. But missing 6 extra points in the same season is kind of something that does stand out to me a little bit, and it could ultimately be the difference in this game. We've seen extra points cost teams games before, so I would be really interested to see, Greg Zuerlein was on the Rams for a number of years. He was a phenomenal kicker. I believe he was all pro. Maybe he was a Pro Bowl kicker. I know.
He was considered probably one of the best, top 3 kickers in the league for a while there.
Yeah, he's great. He's great. They called him Greg the Leg. Like, the guy's got a great leg. But if he starts missing kicks, that's when things start to get a little interesting. And I would, again, Dallas, it's not like they have some stagnant offense where you're like, oh man, I'm worried about my kicker, and I don't know if my team can convert from 2 yards out. They have a plethora of weapons. I would be very interested to see if maybe they come out aggressive in a certain spot. If they do go for it in a situation where normally they might kick a field goal. And again, it's in the dome, it's in the playoffs. He could come out and he could drill a few. Like, I'm not sitting here going, oh, Greg Zuerlein sucks and he's going to be the reason they lose this game. I just thought that number kind of stood out, because you might miss 1 or 2 over the course of a year, but 6 extra points in the same season, I thought that was something to keep an eye on and something interesting to kind of monitor. And again, particularly if he were to miss one early or miss one in a key spot, does Mike McCarthy come back out with him again? Does he just say, hey, it happens, it's a miss? Is he going to be more reliant to go for 2? If it comes down to a last-second field goal, what's his mindset, So it's just something to keep an eye on. And in his defense, 3 of his misses have been from more than 50 yards, so it's not like he's missing chip shots. Again, I'm not sitting here taking anything away from Greg Zuerlein. That number just was something that I thought maybe was a little interesting. And I don't know how that stacks up with other kickers around the league. Truthfully, I don't spend that much time researching kickers, and I would be, questioning anybody who did. But 6 does seem like an abnormally high number to me.
It does. It does seem like a high amount. And also, too, again, if the 49ers do take over that stadium, again, someone in the chat made a really good point. There's been a lot of people from California who've moved to Texas, like a lot. Like, it's insane how many people are making the great migration from Cali to Texas. So you never know. There could be a nice home base, and they could take over Levi's Stadium, or I'm sorry, Levi's Southwest. But essentially, though, what could happen is that could be a point that you're mentioning where fans in the stands, and maybe they do get loud, and maybe that noise could be enough to rattle Greg the Leg, who's missed a couple kicks up until this point. Who knows? Who knows? I think the human element is going to be a huge factor in this game. Obviously, we've talked about the meaning of Jimmy Garoppolo. This likely it is going to be one of the last hoorahs of that 2019 team. There's going to be a lot of people going other ways after this year. So the human element could absolutely come into play. But speaking of, having to have some late game heroics and things like that, what did you think about Robbie Gould having to come out there, hit a couple punts, he scored 9 points in a game that came down to, him winning it on his leg. What did you think about that?
I thought that our dear friend and friend of the channel, Jason Aponte, got absolutely owned. Like, total owned. Like, shut up forever. Robbie Gould owns it. You're done. Like, not only is he out here kicking with Kyle Juszczyk holding for him, his punt saved the 49ers season. If he shanks that punt and they're not able to get that out. Another thing I want to add real quick. I saw a lot of people like, why aren't the 49ers going for it on 4th and 18? Because it's much more likely that your defense gets a stop on 3 straight downs than it is to convert. 4th and 18s are extremely difficult to convert. And I think that we all got skewed a little bit on that when Justin Herbert converted like 6 of them in a row in that crazy Sunday night game. But Kyle Shanahan being willing to put his season on the line and being like, hey, Robbie, not only do we need you to punt it, he was punting from his own end zone. Like, if he shanks that punt or they have a decent return like they did earlier in the game, the Rams kick a field goal and they're up 2 scores, and it doesn't matter how quick the Niners go down the field. That touchdown doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. So Robbie Gould not only saved the season, he pulled double duty, and Kyle Juszczyk deserves some credit too. So apparently, I believe David Lombardi said it, that there was, when Mitch Wisnowski was on the COVID list, they had Robbie Gould work on some punting during practice. He'd done it previously in his career. So he had some familiarity there. But again, having a guy that isn't a regular punter go out and do what he did in that spot is so big. And it's kind of like funny. We can make jokes about it like, oh, the punt saved the season. But objectively, if Robbie Gould doesn't get off a good punt there, the 49ers don't win that game. So I think he deserves a lot of credit. And then the other thing I would say is Kyle Juszczyk is worth every penny. I foolishly, and so I really like Josh Hockett. I thought that he would be a good replacement for Juszczyk one day. I think he's a good player. I allowed myself, this was like early last season, like early 2020, to go, man, if Juszczyk comes back at a crazy number, and then he's re-signed for much less than I expected he would. So I was like, man, I just don't, I wasn't saying necessarily don't sign him if I recall correctly, but I was like, man, I don't know if I can go out and, commit this much money to a fullback who isn't getting this amount of touches and da-da-da-da-da. And I could not have been more wrong. It was extremely stupid on my part because it overlooked all the things that he brings to this offense with his versatility, with his blocking ability, with his the mismatch that he is as a receiver, all the great things that he does. He is the ultimate Swiss Army knife. And I was a complete idiot and fool for ever questioning that Kyle Juszczyk might not be worth an insane contract. And yeah, like, again, are you going to pay a fullback $40 million a year? Like, yeah, that'd be a bit absurd. But for what he re-signed for, he is worth every penny. And I feel like a fool for ever having that thought enter my mind that, oh, you got to save money coming up soon. And it wasn't that I thought he played bad, but he's the best fullback in the league, and he has been for basically a decade now. But my thinking was, hey, they need to save money somewhere. Why not do it at one of the positions that's, right. I don't want to say it's not as much of an impact, but I thought maybe they could get by doing that. So I just have to throw that out there. I was a complete idiot for doing that, and I feel so stupid every time I think about it. And Kyle Juszczyk going out there and holding kicks in a must-win game, because, again, people just think, oh, this is automatic. Oh, kickers should make all their kicks. The chemistry between a long snapper like Tabor Pepper and the holder and Wisnowski and the kicker and Gould, these 3 guys are together on their own every single practice working together. And when you remove one from that equation, it's extremely difficult. And the fact that Kyle, because I'm not going to lie, sitting there during that game, I was like, oh my God, this is going to come down to a field goal or an extra point where the hold's bad, or it's, it's uncomfortable. If you're not doing that all the time, it's a really tough position to be in. And Kyle Juszczyk did it flawlessly. So I apologize for ever having the thought enter my mind. hey, maybe the 49ers should cut some corners and, let Kyle Juszczyk walk. And I thought the Jets would sign him to this big lucrative deal because they're trying to, they're running a similar scheme with Mike LaFleur, and you could have Josh Hawkins step in. I think Josh Hawkins is a good player. I think he has a decently bright future. Kyle Juszczyk is worth every single penny, and idiots like myself should feel awful for ever doubting that there was a moment that you thought that maybe they're paying too much money to a fullback, because this guy is the ultimate Swiss Army knife.
I love some of the stories that came out today, especially from Juice himself. He said today that he thought that he was going to make the NFL specifically as a holder, not even realizing that that wasn't a position. It was, it's either the punter and or backup quarterback that typically holds, catches a snap from the long snapper and then sets it for the field goal kicker to hit it. I just thought that was funny because he's like, well, my brother was yeah, he said that today. He said his brother was a long snapper. So he was always in the backyard practicing catching snaps and setting. So he literally thought, he's like, I'm going to the NFL to be a holder. Like that was his role in his mind. And he had the awakening that was like, wait, they don't have dedicated holders. I thought that was hilarious. But it's wild how it all works out because, too, not only that, Hightower talked about how Juice has been practicing snaps with catching snaps with special teams every Thursday for 5 years. And it's just like, it's crazy when they pull back the curtain a little bit.
It was perfect. Like, he was flawless. Like, that's what blew me away going back and watching some of this. It's like it wasn't just like, oh, it's adequate. Perfect. And having a guy that you could just put everywhere that will do everything is so invaluable. And again, pay Kyle Juszczyk whatever he wants, blank check for the remainder of the days that he wants to be in the NFL, because having a guy like that on your team, that's just not only a lightning rod and an extremely high IQ player, but the ability to step in and do all that. I don't care if they're a fullback or an H-back or any of this stuff. Like, pay him what he wants. I'm not going to sit here and act like I always thought that. Like, I allowed myself to get kind of caught up in this team building clouded lens where I'm like, if I'm diverting resources, I'm putting more money towards my corners and my
GM Jordan was speaking, and GM Jordan doesn't leave pennies around. He makes sure it's done efficiently. So I understand where you're coming from.
But GM Jordan would be fired for moving on from a player like Kyle Juszczyk, and deservedly so. So 2020 Jordan can kick rocks because he's an idiot for ever thinking that. So I apologize again if he ever happens to come across this clip. Kyle Juszczyk, I, from the bottom of my heart, apologize for ever doubting for a moment that you might not be worth a lucrative extension, because you are worth every penny, and I am extremely blessed to get to cover a team that you play for.
Oh, I can't wait. GM Jordan's evolving. That means this offseason is going to be even better. I can't wait because there's going to be so many moves to talk about coming up, but we don't want to talk about them just yet. We want to stay right here on the playoffs. We haven't spent a ton of time about Dak Prescott, but I do want to extrapolate that a little bit further. Do you think Dak Prescott right now is the Dallas Cowboys' best opportunity of winning this game?
Yeah, Dak's a baller. Dak is one of my favorite QBs in the NFL to watch. He is so good. He has such good arm talent, but he's so cerebral too. And I think that there have been a couple games this year where he hasn't looked great. I think coming back from that injury has, he's had to change the way he plays. He was a guy who I thought was a little bit more willing to take off and run when things break down. But when you suffer a, just horrific injury like that, it's going to make you be a little bit more reluctant to do those things. But when he's on top of his game, Dak is one of the best quarterbacks in this league. He is so fun to watch. I think, obviously I know 49ers fans don't want to sit here and watch him just light them up, but they haven't played the 49ers this year. So I've gotten extreme joy from watching this man play football. I just think that there is there's such a heavy weight of being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. It's arguably the most scrutinized position in all of American professional sports, where you just have eyes on you all the time. Every little mistake is magnified. That I think at times it tends to mask what he's done. And he had a couple of really good games in the past in the playoffs against Green Bay, where Aaron Rodgers just went insane into God mode, and that just made Dak Prescott, people kind of forgot that, hey, he played pretty well in these playoff games. He's looked good. He hasn't been a liability. He's risen to the occasion. You're just going up against a guy who has a ceiling that, in my opinion, is higher than anybody else's. Like, I forget who it was to. I'm pissed that I'm blanking on. I think it was Richard Rodgers, maybe. But that throw that he had down the sideline in 2016, I think it was, Rodgers did, when the Cowboys had basically had that game won, Dak as a rookie went toe-to-toe with Aaron Rodgers, and then Aaron Rodgers comes down the sideline and throws a rope, like one of the best balls I've ever seen thrown at the NFL level. And it kind of takes away from us being able to have a conversation where it's like, hey, man, like, Dak's had been there, done that, because people will talk about, hey, Jimmy played in playoff games, and people always talk about the limited number of attempts and all that stuff. But he's been through the, the motions and been in a playoff environment. Dak has too, and it just feels like sometimes we forget how good he was in those moments too, simply because he had Aaron Rodgers on the other side. And I think that that's not fair to him, because Dak is, again, I think he's anywhere between like 5 to 7 on a given day if I'm ranking quarterbacks, but he's phenomenal. I would love to have a quarterback like Dak lead my franchise if I had any say in it. And in terms of him being their best chance of winning, I don't want to be negative, and I actually think that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to play a clean game. I think maybe at most he'll turn the ball over once, but I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't at all. Like, that was my bold prediction, is I think he's just going to play a clean game and not turn it over. The Cowboys' greatest chance of winning this game is Jimmy playing like he did in the first half against the Rams for an entire 60 minutes, because ultimately Dak Prescott can throw the ball 6 or 7 times, and if Jimmy plays like that, it doesn't really matter. I think so much of it depends on the 49ers, and not just Jimmy. The 49ers as a whole taking care of the ball, not making special teams mistakes. Like, the 49ers playing a clean game makes this an interesting matchup. If the 49ers are sloppy like we've seen them at times, it doesn't really matter what Dak does. The Cowboys are too good, and they'll take advantage of it. But I don't think that the Cowboys are necessarily overly reliant on Dak Prescott just going out and throwing for 450 yards and 4 touchdowns. I think they're far too balanced to be that one-dimensional. But it is something that the 49ers have to account for, because, again, I can't say enough nice things about Dak Prescott. He's an extremely, extremely talented quarterback.
Absolutely. This is the segment where we have 49er fans and Cowboys fans in the chat, and they're very confused because Jordan and I have a lot of respect for Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is a draft son of mine out of Mississippi State, a guy that I loved, guy that I wanted the 49ers to draft. I told my Dak Prescott draft story earlier in the week, but Dak Prescott is a quarterback that I respect immensely because I don't have the colored glasses of he's a Cowboy quarterback, so I have to hate him because I liked him before he was a Cowboy. Dak Prescott, you said it, one of the best things that I think you said about him, he's very cerebral. He's very smart. He knows where to go with the ball. He knows what defenses are trying to do to him, and he's going to do his best to put the ball in a good spot. He takes care of it. So I agree. I think Dak Prescott is going to be someone that we're just going to have to deal with, and we're going to have to take the lumps as they come because Dak Prescott is a very good quarterback. Gets hated on because he's the Cowboys quarterback. Everyone hates the Cowboys if you're not a Cowboys fan, so it is what it is.
And how can I add? Sorry, I'm going to cut you off. Dak Prescott, it's like one of those things too where it's like Russell Wilson. Like, I've watched Russell Wilson carve up the 49ers for 10 years, and it seems like he plays his best football against the 49ers. Yes. I don't see how people can sit there and just like despise Russell Wilson. Like, I get, like, if you're a 49ers fan, I get it. I understand. Like, I would not be a fan of a guy like that either if he beat my team that way. But when you isolate the person, I feel like Dak is in that same tier where they're just so likable, where it's really just as simple as Brad said. Like, he just happens to play quarterback for the Cowboys. But if he played for another team, I think he would get so much more respect and love. But just because he plays for the Cowboys and he's under the scrutiny, and because so many people just hate the Cowboys, he doesn't get the love he deserves. So, yeah, I think Dak is a phenomenal player, and no matter what happens in this game, my opinion of him won't change over one game. He's a franchise QB. He's a top 5 to 7 guy. To me, he's in the elite tier, and I think we have to remember that he not only was coming back from that really bad – I think it was a compound fracture in his ankle. I apologize if I don't have the exact injury. But it was horrific last season. And then he also had a calf injury this season, and his production has dropped significantly since the calf injury. So these things in context matter as well. So Dak Prescott's a great player, and unfortunately what will happen is if the 49ers come out and win this game, we're going to see a bunch of and it's kind of, I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of funny. I'll probably laugh at some of it. We're going to see a bunch of Jimmy G owns Dak Prescott memes and Jimmy's the better quarterback, and 49ers
Jimmy owns Micah Parsons, all that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all these and it's part of the fun of doing this. It's entertainment, it's content, but what happens in this game won't change my opinion of Dak Prescott. He's a great quarterback, and I think Cowboys fans know that, and I think that they're very happy to have him around. And just know that even though there's this, I'm 26 years old, man. I haven't really I haven't seen this rivalry ever be anything more than some regular season matchups. The only time I ever saw it get heated was when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I barely remember. I only remember that game because of T.O. dancing on the star, or, doing the pose in the middle of the star. That to me is the most heated I've ever seen this rivalry. So,
right.
Forgive me for not sitting here and having this huge amount of disdain in my heart for the Cowboys, but I'm not going to sit here and carry this like hate that like my parents went through at Candlestick when they had, would go to games and they despised the Cowboys and those darn, like all these people hate the Cowboys.
F them boys.
Yeah, I'm too young for that, man. So I'm excited to watch this matchup, and I apologize if 49ers fans don't want to hear me just heaping praise on Dak Prescott, but I'm a fan of football first and foremost, and Dak Prescott's a hell of a football player.
Exactly, and that's why I said the chat's about to get real confused about two guys who cover the 49ers heaping nothing but praise on Dak Prescott. I don't got a negative thing to say about the guy, to be 100% bluntly honest. I have not a word. Like, how do you criticize the guy? I think he's a saint. He just happens to play. The only thing I can criticize him about, he plays for the damn Cowboys. F the boys still, though. That's still true. But I'm going to put you on the spot here, Jordan, because we have talked a lot about Bosa. We've talked about Bosa getting snubbed a little bit here or there. The comeback player of the year is probably squarely between Dak Prescott and Nick Bosa. And I know you're going to shoot it straight, regardless of who you're speaking to. Who would you give comeback player of the year to? Would you give it to Nick Bosa with the 15.5 sacks? Or would you give it to Dak Prescott off the broken ankle or whatever? He turned his ankle the other way and was able to lead his team to what? 3 seed in the playoffs? Who would you give to?
Two things. First of all, I think that the comeback player of the year award should be given to guys who have like resurgent career. Like they may have had a down few years. They may have been guys who never really, got going early in their careers and found a way to rebound. It feels like it just goes to whatever big name player gets injured and has a major injury, season-ending injury, and then comes back the next year. And I don't want to take anything away from the amount of rehab and the amount of work that goes into coming back from something like that. That is extremely difficult, and I don't want to downplay it. But I just feel like it makes these awards very predictable. And then my second part ties directly into that because I would give it to who I think is going to win it, and I don't think it will be either of those players. I think it's going to be I think it's going to be Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow will win comeback player of the year. I thought he had a very good season for the Bengals. He had the ACL injury last year. And again,
he's picking up steam too.
Quarterback, injury, season ending, came back, played great. That's kind of the criteria of how it goes. The only time that's really like that trend has been bucked is when like Ryan Tannehill won it, when he basically like came back from having Adam Gase as his coach. Like that was his like big, that was the challenge that he had to rise up above and overcome, which in his defense, it feels like that's actually a pretty reasonable take given Adam Gase's track record as a head coach. So I just think the way it goes, like it's going to go to a big name guy, and it may go to Dak. It won't go to Nick Bosa, and it doesn't take anything away from Nick Bosa, but they, for whatever reason, don't want, I don't say for whatever reason, it's obvious. Quarterbacks sell. If you have guys that are offense sells, numbers sell, touchdowns, yards, all that stuff sells. The NFL is a business. They stand far more to gain by marketing Joe Burrow or Dak Prescott than they do Nick Bosa. And unfortunately, it comes back to a situation where it's like, I think you could make the case that Trent Williams is the MVP of the NFL this season. I mean, you could argue that if we're talking about just I
would be right there next to you championing that argument.
Or let's say that, like there was a most outstanding, like the Heisman, I believe, is the most outstanding player in college football. It's not most valuable. The way it's worded is most outstanding. To me, Trent Williams fits the bill. The season he had, again, I think is the best season a left tackle has ever had. He was just phenomenal. You're not going to give a left tackle a major award like that. And basically the way the MVP award is it's whatever quarterback has the flashiest numbers for a team that's heavily in the playoff hunt. That's a 1 seed or 2 seed. And it takes away, I think, the validity of what so many of these guys do, because they have the NFL awards. I think it's like the Saturday or Sunday before the Super Bowl, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest. I mean, yeah, people will tune in, but so many of these guys, by the time like their seasons are done for their team, there's 2 teams left at that point. A lot of people check out, and I think unfortunately what happens is a lot of really good players that don't deserve recognition don't get the credit they deserve simply because they didn't get an award with a flashy name or a flashy title or something like that. So I think it'll go to Joe Burrow, but I also think that should take nothing away from Dak Prescott and Nick Bosa both coming back from very, very serious injuries and playing like absolute studs the following year, which again is like modern science is incredible and modern medicine. Like Cam Akers tore his Achilles like 4 months ago or something like that, 5 months ago, and he's playing in the playoffs. He carried the ball 5 times against the Niners. I've never seen somebody come back from a torn Achilles so fast. So, you know, a lot of it does have to do with modern medicine, but these guys still have to commit to the rehab process. And it just feels like they're not going to do it, but it would be almost nice to see, like, they have these all-pro teams. Like, make a team of the best players who came back from injury or something like that. Like, I don't know, man. Like, if we're going to give recognition to one guy, you might as well give it to the group, because Joe Burrow may win it, but that doesn't take away from the rehab and all the work that Dak Prescott did to come back. That doesn't take away from all the countless hours Nick Bosa spent to, you know, put it back. I'm not saying that everybody should win like a participation trophy, but like it kind of feels like it basically is a participation trophy that only one person receives. And if you're going to give it to one person, you might as well give it to all of them. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm way off there, but that's what it feels like.
You're just galaxy branding it. You're definitely galaxy branding it, but we got the answer. It's neither of the two that we posed, but I think it is trending that direction towards Joe Burrow. We got Cowboys fans in the chat sending super chats and contributions. Terrence says, I appreciate you fellas keeping it real. You two showing some really good content. Let's go. Hashtag Cowboy Nation. Terrence, we appreciate you watching and being respectful yourself, my good friend. Thank you for the super chat. And I can't wait for this matchup, guys. This matchup is going to be insane. You can see the chat. Like, we've been doing this all year, and we have not had an opposing fan base come kind of bum rush our chat like this and be talking back and clapping back at us. I like to see it. It's a lot of good stuff going on out here. Godzilla says, Jimmy G to Kittle, the catch 4 on Sunday. Pin this. Hey, Splash Cousin, the boy Jordan said this is going to be a George Kittle game. That lines up, and hell, we'll take it. I'll take the catch 4 game. What say you, Jordan?
I'd say you would be a fool to ever disagree with Godzilla. So I agree. I'm not going to be a fool and do it. Yeah, I'm with you, Godzilla. Let's go.
Oh my goodness, I absolutely freaking love it. So I want to pull the chat. It's time to get the chat involved. It does look like we have a strong kind of we have both fan bases in here today. So I actually want to see from Cowboy fans as well. What are the score predictions going to be? I need the chat to light it up. Drop your score predictions in the chat. 49ers versus Cowboys this weekend, playoff game for the ages. And that will transition me into asking you, Jordan, what kind of scoring game do you see? Is this going to be a high scoring game? Is it going to be a game that comes down to the last play? What do you think what kind of flow and finish is this game going to have in your opinion? And what would you, if I had to put you on the spot and give you a score prediction to make, what's it going to be?
I actually did predictions today with the staff writers, the other staff writers at, Niners Nation. I'll just stick to that and try to keep it as consistent as possible. I went back and forth. The Cowboys are a great team. I know there's a lot of Cowboys fans watching this right now. I don't take anything away from you guys. And, 49ers fans may get extremely upset at me for this. But if they were to lose this week, I would actually like to see the Cowboys go on a run. And I would like to see Dak get them into a Super Bowl and see how that would pan out. Having said that, I just think that the 49ers style of play is something that will make the Cowboys very uncomfortable. To me, there are 2 things that are so important for road teams to win in the playoffs. It helps in the playoffs in general, but especially when you have to go on the road, and that's being able to run the football on offense and being able to rush the passer on defense. And to me, those are the 2 things that the 49ers just are able to do it at an extremely high level. That's, to me, the two biggest strengths of the team. I think it'll be close. And one other thing that we have to really account for is, who do you trust more between Kyle Shanahan and Mike McCarthy? I personally am a known fan and defender of Kyle Shanahan. I would lean his way in this one. I know Kellen Moore has done a great job as the OC there. I'm a big fan of Dan Quinn's as well. What he's done with that defense is really good. Kyle Shanahan's been in his bag lately. And when Kyle Shanahan gets in his bag, there's nobody better than him. So with all that considered, I look at this. I have 30-24 is my final prediction, with the 49ers winning. I think they find a way to extend a lead late. Maybe they get a touchdown to take the lead. Maybe they kick a field goal to push it to 6. I think that they put the Cowboys into a spot where the Cowboys will be forced to drive down the field, needing a touchdown to win this game. And I think that 49ers defense, and the D-line in particular, makes a big stand and propels them to the next round. But at the same time, I do think that this will be a very tough, very hard-fought game, and the Cowboys are not a team to take lightly. So I'm very excited to see how this pans out.
Yeah, dude, this is going to be an intense game. Chris Royal says, I'm saying it, just as Jordan said, whoever wins here is going all the way. And I mean, it really does feel like that. I mean, there's a lot of energy packed into this game. Again, I was talking about the way the kind of stars are aligning a little bit, the way the timing is working out. Obviously, a lot of individual storylines on the 49er side. I'm sure there are the same on the Cowboys side. It does feel like this will be a game, probably might be the best game of this weekend that is coming up here on the docket. I mean, there are going to be some good teams, there's going to be some good matchups, but this one just feels like it's got all the energy. It feels like it's got all the juice. It feels like it's got all the history of the rivalry and how the 49ers got their start and just the back and forth between these two epic franchises. It just really feels like this is going to be like a game that we're going to look back on years down the road, where we're just talking about, remember that time? Whether, like I kind of agree, like based on which way it goes, I think both teams are coming into this matchup with a pretty damn equal opportunity to win this. I really feel like it's going to come down to, kind of similar to what you said, it's going to be the last drive, whether it's the 49ers, whether it's the Cowboys, flip a coin. It can go either way. It's obviously all going to depend on game flow for the 49ers, at least. And we know how we roll. What kind of team are we going to see early? And that is going to translate into what type of team we see at the end. Obviously, we understand this team is capable of coming back. They have had more slow starts this year than I feel like any other year than I can remember, but they do seem to get it going in the second half, specifically right before halftime. Those 2-minute drives, whether it's 3 points, whether it's 7 points, they do find a way to get things going heading into the half. So overall, though, it does really feel like it is going to come down to a last minute drive, last minute kick, last minute touchdown. It just feels like, again, the energy, it would be a disservice, I think, for either fan base to watch this be a blowout on either side. I know that if that was the case, the other side that comes out on top is going to be very happy about that. But it just feels like this is going to be one of those games where it's a knockout, drag out, punch fest till the end. Um, and it just feels like it's going to come down the wire. Could be a kick, could be a game-winning touchdown, whatever it's going to be. I think it's going to be in the 30s. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think these offenses are going to take shots back and forth. I think Dak Prescott is going to do Dak Prescott things with CeeDee Lamb. I think Pollard and Zeke might bust a couple big runs here or there, but I think it's just going to be a straight-up heavyweight fight when it's all said and done. So I'm excited. I think this game is going to be so much fun, and I can't wait. Jordan, before we break, anything else that you want to touch on here before we get prepared for one of the most exciting games that I've been looking forward to in a long time?
No, I mean, I appreciate the camaraderie, and I understand. Like I said, I'm throwing it out there. Like I'm not old enough to remember this rivalry mattering for me, so I don't have this hatred in my heart for Dallas, and vice versa for Cowboys fans who hate the Niners. I respect it. I grew up hearing about this all the time. Um, I I can appreciate it. So I've enjoyed watching the back and forth all week. I've enjoyed seeing how passionate, just like you said, like all year I've been doing these, and there haven't been this many fans of an opposing team. So I greatly respect the rivalry. I greatly respect the camaraderie. It's just been fun, man. So I hope that the game delivers on the same level that the fans have delivered all week, because
Right.
the fans have shown up, and the fans for both sides have been loud and proud and representing their teams. And I just hope that the game is able to live up to the hype, because it's been, I can't remember the last time the 49ers had a playoff game that had this much juice, it felt like, going up to it. I don't think I was there for both the games in 2019. I don't think it was quite the same. I have to
Mm-mm.
say it would probably be that Seahawks NFC Championship game was the last time that, like, really there was a week where it was like, I
Yeah.
can't stand these guys and I have to see the Niners
Yeah.
beat them. Like,
I
I
would
don't
agree with
care
that.
about anything else. Beat those guys. It's been a long time since we've seen that. So it's nice to see that again. And I think whoever wins this game has a great shot of making a run through the NFC playoffs. I'm not saying that I think the Niners will win simply based on talent or because they're a better team. I just think that the style of football they play will give Dallas problems. And I think that, again, I've been one of the more vocal critics of Jimmy Garoppolo over the last couple of years, and I'm not backing down from that. I'm not backpedaling that take. I think he is who he is. But I also think that there's credit due, and I think that he is playing with a confidence that I haven't seen in a long time. And I would not want to bet against him right now. I don't think this is a game where you can sit there and just go, oh, here comes Jimmy throwing picks over the middle to linebackers he doesn't see, or fumbling the ball, or, I don't think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see a dangerous Jimmy Garoppolo in this game, in a good way. Dangerous for the Cowboys. Let me make that very clear. Not dangerous like he's turning the ball over. I think we're going to see
Make
a
sure
Jimmy
you
Garoppolo.
preface what kind of dangerous.
And if they start winning games, 49ers fans, remember when they went into Green Bay, it's obviously a different team, but they went into Green Bay, and they went into Carolina, and then they went into Seattle, and they should have won that game, for all being honest. They got absolutely hosed in that game. I'm not going to get into it. It's just going to make everybody upset. Once you win that first game, the momentum really starts to build up, and you really start to find some belief, and you really start to, and I think that the 49ers have a bit of an advantage, simply based on the fact that they played a playoff game last week. They were in a win or go home spot. The Cowboys dropped 51 on the Eagles practice squad. And that doesn't mean that the Cowboys won't come out ready, but the 49ers are already in that survival mode, and they've already had a taste of that. And I don't think that they're coming out. I think they got that coming out flat out of the way last week, and they won't have that slow start again this week.
Could you argue that the 49ers have been in playoff mode since week 14 against the Bengals, and they had to have a game-winning drive to come back and win that game to keep their season alive? So could you make the argument that the 49ers have been in playoff mode for a better part of a month already?
Yeah, you definitely could. I think definitely since the Texans game. Once they lost that Texans game, it was like, okay, you have to win these. I was thinking a little bit about this earlier. Like they fell to, I think, 6-6 when they lost to the Seahawks, if I remember correctly, and they went 4-1 to finish out the season. And they had to go on the road to Tennessee, who's the one seed in the AFC, to the Bengals, who are a playoff team in the AFC, and to Los Angeles, a division rival and another playoff team. And they won 2 out of those games. I think a lot of people expected them to beat the Texans and Falcons. Hey, you still have to win those games. The Texans kept the Chargers out of the playoffs, dropping 41 on them in week 17. So it's not anything that should be taken lightly, but I think that there has been a level of urgency in the second half. So it could be after the Bengals game. I think it almost was leading to the Bengals game. Like after that Seahawks game, they couldn't afford to fall to 6-7 and lose. If they lose
Right.
that game to the Bengals, the season's probably over. It's definitely over if it would have played out the rest of the way, because they would have not have got in at 9-8 due to the Saints winning
Right.
their Week 18 game. So yeah, like I think that they've responded really well this year. Like they've dropped games to get to 500. They had that losing skid early in the year, but lately when their backs have been up against the wall and they have to win a game, not like, oh, if you win this game it'll really help. Like, yeah, the Titans game sucked, man. There's no other way around it. Like they should have won that game. They imploded. I know where a lot of people are placing blame for that game, and I'm not going to argue with them. I just don't want to get into it right now. There's no need to. but that wasn't a like must-win situation. They had to beat Houston. They had to beat the Rams when they were down 17-0. Just like you mentioned, like they pretty much had to beat Cincinnati at that point in time, and they just found a way to do it. So I think that you can throw logic out the window. And I understand Cowboys fans that have watched Jimmy play in spurts and they've watched this team maybe when they haven't been at their best, where it's like, oh yeah, the Cowboys, they can run all over these guys. They're, this is gonna be an easy game. I'm just telling you, man, you can't apply logic to this 49ers team. They have defied logic all season. When you expect one thing, they do another. And it's just, you're going to drive yourself crazy if you try to approach this logically. I obviously, like, as people who cover the team, like, we kind of have to do it, but don't expect the unexpected in this one. And I think, to me, the biggest thing that would be a surprise to most Cowboys fans is Jimmy G going out there and, again, not going out and throwing for a bunch of yards and throwing a crazy amount of touchdowns here, but going out there and just efficiently hitting throws when he needs to, getting the ball to his playmakers in space. Like those third down conversions in overtime last week, those were huge. Some of those out, it may not look like much to people, but when you execute that 5-6 yard out route and you're moving the sticks like that, like it builds confidence. And I think we're going to see, again, I know I keep coming back to that word. I'm sorry for repeating myself, but we're going to see a confident Jimmy Garoppolo. And you can be confident and be 15 to 20 for 150 yards and a touchdown. You don't have to go out and light up the stat sheet, but if you play efficiently enough, the rest of this team is so good that I think that we have enough in Jimmy to get them to the next round. And again, that doesn't take anything away from the Cowboys. This Niners team is just extremely difficult to beat when they were playing at the top of their game.
Absolutely. So, as you can see, this game is got all the makings of an instant classic. We're absolutely excited for it. We thank all of you guys for dropping in the chat. Again, we had some Dallas fans in the chat today vibing with us. Hey, for the most part, they kept some good energy. I mean, I seen them talking mess back and forth, but for the most part, it was good to get a little bit of some different perspectives out here from Dallas fans. I'm excited, though. I think we're all excited. This week and this game can't get here fast enough. I'm really excited. Jordan, tell the good people where they can find more of your work and get more of your content, especially, again, we don't want our season ending now, but Jordan is going to be a top source of off-season content, so you make sure you are following this man. Tell them where the good people can find more of your work.
You can find me. Twitter is where I do a lot of my stuff. My @'s there at the bottom of the screen. For anyone listening, it's @splash_cousin. And then you can find me at Niners Nation as well, NinersNation.com. They cover the 49ers for SB Nation. I write every week there. I try to do at least 3-4 posts a week if I can. And I will be doing that in the off season as well. So if, hopefully, like Brad said, hopefully the season doesn't end, but if it does and you're looking for, who the Niners might be looking at draft wise, what's the cap situation like, or if you want to just have I'm going to do a recap of the season position by position. So if you want to just relive some of these games and see some of these numbers, I will do my best to provide that content in the off season. I do believe I have a piece. It didn't go out today, so I think it's going out tomorrow, previewing this game and some keys for the 49ers to win this game. So check it out, please. I appreciate it. One of the cool things about SB Nation is that if you have an account on there, you can leave comments under articles, and there's a good, message board underneath. So it's a lot like the YouTube comments here. It's obviously not as lively and active as a live show on here, but you can leave comments and stuff there. And I always appreciate any feedback, and I obviously greatly appreciate any support as well. I do want to end this real quick. I don't know if you're still watching, but I apologize. I greatly disappointed Luke Luna, it looks like, who is a frequent watcher of Brad and I doing this. So I apologize. I'm just saying, man, I'm a fan of football, and the Cowboys play like an exciting brand of football. I'm not pounding the table for them to win. If they bounce the Niners, I'm not going to sit here and actively root against them to lose. I just want to see an exciting football game. And I think that they provide a great chance to do that, just like I think the Packers could, a number of other teams. Obviously, I want to keep covering this team playing football and not shift to off-season mode, so I hope that doesn't happen. I just hope you understand it's not like I'm sitting here rooting for the Cowboys to go on and win another Super Bowl. It's just that this rivalry isn't as personal for me, so I don't hold that same disdain in my heart that a lot of fans do, and I greatly respect the ones that do. So just please don't be so disappointed in me that, this is something that's unforgivable. I'm just saying, Luke, I promise you, it's not what you think. Like, it's just that I just want to see exciting football. I don't care who's playing.
Absolutely. And if there's anything we learn about Jordan, he is not afraid to go against the grain. And he will say and speak the truths that he believes. And we do respect and appreciate that to the fullest. We thank all of you guys who tuned in with us, watched us. Feel free to smash that like button on your way out. Sub if you haven't, because we're going to be doing more content. Might even have some Saturday content. We'll figure it out. But it's going to be epic this weekend based on whatever outcome we see. So hopefully we'll see you guys back. We have a great game to talk about. Obviously, want to be talking about that dub and what other team we're going to be facing on the playoffs, but we take it one day at a time and we'll see what happens. Appreciate all you guys as always again for tuning in and watching us talk football. We do appreciate the Dallas fans chiming in. But we will catch you guys on the other side. Again, appreciate it. And you guys have